Imagine touching a stone wall built nearly 1,000 years ago and realizing it's sturdier than many modern buildings. How did medieval builders without cement mixers, lasers, or engineering degrees create walls that refuse to fall? Chapter 1: Indestructible Foundations, where medieval walls first learned to survive. Before the first stone was ever lifted, before the sound of chisels echoed across the valley, medieval builders understood one thing better than anything else: a wall survives only if the earth beneath it is willing to hold it. We often admire towering castle walls, those massive gray giants gripping the edges of cliffs, but what most people never see is the invisible engineering hidden below the soil. The real story of why medieval walls are still standing doesn't begin with stone. It begins with dirt. Picture a wide, grassy field in the 1100s. The morning fog hasn't lifted yet. A group of men with shovels, picks, and wooden stakes pace slowly, testing the soft earth with their boots. They aren't looking for the prettiest spot or the most scenic view. They're searching for firmness, dryness, and stability, qualities only an expert builder could recognize with a single step. These builders didn't have soil sensors, blueprints, or machines. But they had something we often underestimate: generational instinct. A master mason kneels, scoops a handful of soil, squeezes it, and frowns. Too soft. Mutters, "The wall will sink." The apprentices groan, they'll have to move another 20 feet east. But he is right. One mistake now, and a decade of work will fail later. This almost ritual-like inspection was the first secret behind medieval durability. Digging deep trenches of strength once the right ground was chosen. The digging began. Medieval foundations went far deeper than most people imagine, sometimes 10, 15, even 20 feet down depending on the terrain. These trenches were carved until the builders reached what they called good earth, meaning dense, compacted soil that had settled for centuries. If the ground refused to cooperate, medieval builders didn't give up. They widened trenches, layered gravel, drove in wooden piles, or filled weak spots with crushed stone. Their patience was astonishing. They treated the earth not as an obstacle but as a partner in the construction, because they believed quite literally that a wall began long before the stones were stacked. And they were right. A wall with a poor foundation might look strong for a year, or 10, but not for centuries. The first stones, giants beneath the ground. Next came the foundation stones, enormous blocks often bigger than the ones visible above ground. Many of these foundation stones were so large that a dozen men had to maneuver them with ropes, logs, and pure muscle, and once placed, they were never meant to move again. These stones weren't chosen at random. Medieval masons selected rock with incredible patience: hard limestone, granite, flint, materials that resisted moisture and shifting soil. They aligned them with careful precision, making sure every weight was balanced, every corner firm. The bottommost layers weren't beautiful. They weren't meant to impress visitors, but they were carved with the same care as the stones in the highest towers. Because medieval builders knew something we often forget: a wall is only as immortal as the stones you bury where no one will ever see. The ground that holds the past together. By the time the foundation was complete, the building site resembled a deep, stone-lined trench, wide, stable, immovable. Rainwater drained naturally. The soil was compacted under enormous weight. The foundation acted almost like a ship's keel, anchoring the structure against gravity, floods, or enemies. And here's the amazing part: many medieval foundations were so overbuilt that they could support structures twice the size of what was actually built. In a world without calculators, their margin of safety was astonishing. This was the first secret of their longevity. Medieval walls weren't simply built on the earth, they were fused with it. Cliffhanger transition: but even the strongest foundation would be useless without the strange, almost magical material medieval builders used to bind their stones together. A material that didn't just harden, it grew stronger with age. So what exactly was this ancient living mortar? And why is it nearly impossible to replicate perfectly today? Chapter 2: of the secret recipe, lime mortar, living stone, and the art of slow construction. If medieval foundations were the bones of a lasting wall, then lime mortar was the lifeblood flowing through every joint, every crevice, every stone, and unlike modern cement which begins dying the moment it hardens, lime mortar was alive. It breathed. It changed, it healed, and it kept medieval walls standing for nearly 1,000 years. But here's the part that shocks most people. Medieval builders intentionally used a weaker bonding material. Becca. Use weaker meant stronger. Let's step into that world. Dawn at the mason's yard at sunrise in a medieval construction yard. Apprentices stumble around with wooden tubs, hauling water from a nearby stream. Others shovel pale, chalky powder burnt limestone into mixing pits. The air smells sharp, almost metallic. He listens. Oh, it's slap, sticky drag. A subtle bubbling. If the sound is wrong, the entire batch is ruined. This is the part we forget. Medieval mortar wasn't a simple recipe. It was craftsmanship. It was timing, instinct, and patience. The magic of lime. Why medieval mortar still lives. Modern cement dries fast. It locks into place like a rigid and yielding shell. But medieval builders didn't want hard and rigid. They wanted flexible and breathable. That's where lime mortar came in. Lime mortar works like this. 1. Limestone is burned at high heat until it falls apart into quicklime. 2. Quicklime is mixed with water, creating a boiling, bubbling chemical reaction. 3. This mixture is combined with sand to create the mortar. 4. Instead of drying, lime mortar absorbs carbon dioxide from the air, slowly turning back into stone. In other words, every medieval wall was made of stone glued together by stone that gradually reformed from the air. That slow transformation is why lime mortar lasts centuries. If cracks form, carbon in the atmosphere seeps in and helps it repair itself. It literally heals. Modern cement, once it cracks, it's over. Medieval builders didn't know the chemistry, but they knew the outcome. They watched walls survive storms, wars, and time itself, and they trusted the ancient magic of lime. Breathing walls, the secret. Modern builders forgot another miracle of lime mortar. It breathes. Medieval walls were constantly exposed to damp weather, flooding, and freezing winters. If moisture got trapped inside, stones would swell, crack, or crumble. But lime mortar allowed walls to inhale and exhale, releasing moisture in a slow, safe cycle. It's like giving the wall lungs. Sand, the ingredient everyone overlooks. Sand wasn't just filler. Medieval builders spent enormous effort choosing the right sand. Fine river sand for smooth joints, coarse crushed stone for strength, volcanic sand in regions lucky enough to have it. Some medieval sand sources are protected today because the exact mix is impossible to replicate. Without the correct sand, lime mortar loses its durability. Medieval masons guarded their sand sources like treasure, stone that works with mortar, not against it. Medieval builders also chose stones with just the right softness. Many castle walls used limestone or sandstone, stones that moved with the mortar rather than resisting it. Harder stones like granite were used only when necessary, because they could crack the joints. The key wasn't simply strength, it was harmony. The stone and mortar worked like a married couple, each adjusting slightly when weather or weight changed. Cliffhanger transition. But even with perfect mortar and carefully chosen stones, medieval walls had another secret hiding inside them, something few tourists ever notice. A secret layer, buried between two faces of stone, that made the walls almost indestructible. So what exactly was this hidden engineering trick that acted like a medieval shock absorber? Chapter 3: Wall within a wall. The hidden engineering that modern people overlook. If medieval mortar was the life flowing through a structure, then the actual design of the walls was its nervous system, quiet and seen, but unbelievably clever. To the casual eye, a medieval wall looks like a single solid block of stone, thick, heavy, and penetrable. But inside is one of the most underrated engineering tricks in history, something that even many modern builders overlook. It wasn't one wall, it was 3 walls in one. And that triple-layer sandwich design is one of the biggest reasons medieval fortresses still stand after 900 years of storms, battles, sieges, and time. But that's an illusion. Medieval builders were brilliant at making the outside look simple while hiding complex engineering inside. Their biggest secret was this: the core wall system. 1. Outer face of strong dressed stones. These were the stones you could see, carefully shaped, interlocked, and tightly together. These three layers formed a wall that behaved almost like a living organism. Had flexibility, weight distribution, and internal damping that modern solid concrete can't easily mimic. Why two walls are better than one? The double-faced design ensured that the visible parts of the wall endured the weather, while the hidden core provided mass and strength. Think of it like this: the outer layers gave shape, beauty, and precision. It's a hybrid between a stone building and an engineered dam. The core wasn't just dumped in. Medieval workers poured layer after layer stones of different sizes, gravel, crushed rock, and each layer was drenched in wet lime mortar. Over time, it hardened into an almost monolithic mass. Some historians call this core liquid stone because it flowed into every gap before solidifying. And once it hardened, the result was astonishing. A medieval wall didn't merely stand still. It adapted. How this design helped walls survive attacks during sieges. Battering rams slammed repeatedly against fortress walls, but instead of collapsing, the walls absorbed the impact because the rubble core acted like a thick cushion distributing force evenly. A rigid solid wall would crack, but a medieval triple-layer wall bent and flexed just enough to survive. The same principle helped against earthquakes, ground shifts. The genius lay in understanding a simple truth: a wall that not move will eventually break, tapering thinner at the top, mighty at the base. Another clever detail was tapering. Medieval walls were widest at the bottom and gradually narrowed as they rose. This wasn't aesthetics, it was engineering. A wide base meant lower center of gravity, greater resistance to pushing forces, enormous stability during storms. And narrow out top meant every few feet masons inserted what they called bond stones, long blocks that cut across the entire wall thickness, stitching the two visible faces together. Without these, the outer layers would gradually drift apart. With them, the wall became a unified structure. A master builder's lesson. There's an old tale of a French master mason who, when asked why he built walls with so many layers and angles, replied, "A wall must stand like a mountain but move like a river." Strange words, yet true. They were built like ecosystems. So how did medieval builders protect their walls from centuries of punishment? And what ancient waterproofing methods are so effective that some engineers still copy them today? Chapter 4: Weatherproofing. The Middle Ages. How they protected walls from rain, wind, and time. If you stand beside a medieval wall today, run your fingertips over its rough surface. Feel the coolness of stone that has survived almost a millennium. You're touching something that spent its entire life battling the elements. Rain hammered it, winter froze it, summer baked it, wine scoured it, and still, it held firm. Why? Because medieval builders were not just stone workers, they were weather strategists. They understood that nature was always attacking, always wearing things down. And they armed their walls with defenses that were shockingly effective. Let's step back 900 years and see how they did it. The greatest threat: water. Water, wind, heat, snow, time, all dangerous. But the greatest enemy of medieval stone: water. Water gets into tiny cracks. It freezes. It expands. It breaks stone apart from within. Modern builders often underestimate this. Medieval builders feared it. It's why nearly every weatherproofing technique in the Middle Ages, no matter how strange or simple, came down to this: keep water out, move water away, let walls breathe. They understood which stones absorbed water slowly, resisted cracking, shed rain efficiently. Hard sandstone, limestone, and granite were common, but they weren't chosen randomly. Builders studied quarries like doctors study patients. They knew which layer of a quarry produced the toughest stone and avoided layers that crumbled under sunlight. Sometimes, they rejected stones that looked perfect but were too porous. It wasn't about beauty, it was about endurance. And that's part of the genius. Medieval builders didn't ask what stone looked best. They asked what stone wanted to survive. The roof, the silent guardian of every wall. People admire castles and cathedrals for their walls, but medieval builders would laugh at that. Because the real protector of every medieval structure wasn't the wall, it was the roof. A good roof meant rain was deflected far away, walls didn't stay soaked, foundations remained solid. Steep roofs were common for a reason: they shed water fast. Long eaves were added to keep rainwater off the walls. Even stone fortresses used lead, copper, tile, or wood shingles as top layers to make sure water never lingered. And the gutters were clever. Hidden drainage, the secret beneath your feet, and slope channels to guide water downhill. Imagine a team of workers laying stones underground, knowing no one would ever see their work but understanding it might save the structure for centuries. Drainage tunnels. Medieval masons also understood wind better than most people think. Instead of fighting wind, they shaped buildings to work with it. Rounded towers so wind slipped around them sloped. Parapets to reduce pressure. Strategic orientation so wind dried walls instead of soaking them in many places. Wind became an ally, drying rain and preventing moss and mold. Maintenance rituals. The annual wall doctors, perhaps the most underrated factor of medieval preservation, was routine maintenance. Cliffhanger transition, but as much as weatherproofing mattered. Medieval walls had another secret advantage: the people who built them. Their skills weren't just technical, they were cultural, emotional, and passed down through generations. So, who were these master craftsmen? How did their secrets survive centuries? And what did they know that modern builders often forget? Chapter 5: The Human Factor. Skilled craftsmen, generational knowledge and construction culture. Of the stones, mortar, and engineering were the muscles and bones of medieval walls. The craftsmen were the heartbeat. Their hands shaped every curve. Their eyes judged every angle. Their instincts guided every decision. And long before machines, calculators, or written codes existed, it was these humans, ordinary workers with extraordinary skill, who created structures strong enough to outlive empires. To understand why some medieval walls are still standing after 900 years, you must understand the people who built them. After long training, they became journeyman traveling builders who worked in different towns, learning new techniques. Only after proving their mastery could they become master masons. They were architectural leaders of their time. Guild training created consistency. Consistency created reliability. Reliability created walls that lasted. Builders who thought in centuries, not years. Modern construction often thinks in budgets, deadlines, and profit margins. Medieval builders thought in generations. They didn't build houses they expected to sell. They built structures they expected their great-grandchildren to use. This mindset changed everything. A master mason didn't choose material based on cost, but on durability. He didn't rush the curing of mortar because he knew haste created weakness. He didn't compromise on foundation depth because shortcuts meant failure in storms. When a medieval mason placed a stone, he placed it for the future. Imagine building something knowing you'll never see its completion. The mason's language, silent knowledge passed through hands. Much of medieval building knowledge was never written down. It was transmitted through motion and repetition, masters correcting apprentices with a gentle tap on the wrist or a firm grip on the elbow. How to judge stone grain. How to place a block so it sits instead of fights. How to mix mortar by sound rather than sight. Many sites began with blessings, songs, or even feasts. Workers placed coins, carved marks, or small tokens inside early layers of stone for good fortune. These weren't superstitions, they were reminders that a wall was a shared creation. And with shared creation came shared responsibility. If a worker carved a stone poorly, it affected everyone, so they held each other accountable, not through threats, but through culture. Shame was a powerful motivator. Praise was rare but treasured. A mason who earned respect carried it like a badge, and when a wall was completed, entire towns celebrated. They weren't just witnessing a building, they were witnessing the result of human unity, discipline, and skill. Trial and error. The medieval way of improvement. Here's something remarkable. Medieval builders rarely repeated their mistakes. If a tower collapsed due to weak foundations, the next one had deeper ones. If a wall cracked because the stone was too soft, they chose different quarries. History became their laboratory. And because villages communicated through guilds and traveling workers, innovation spread. A builder in Germany might discover better stone bonding techniques. This shared evolution sharpened the craft until medieval walls reached near perfection. Invisible builders, visible brilliance. Most medieval builders remain nameless. Their records faded, their signatures lost. Their lives never documented, but their work endures. Every stone still in place after 900 years is a testament to the human hands behind it. The craftsmanship wasn't magic, it was dedication, culture, discipline, and purpose. And perhaps that's the real secret. Medieval walls lasted because they were built by people who cared deeply about what they left behind. Cliffhanger transition. But now we reach the final question, the one that ties everything together. Why do these walls still stand when modern buildings fail in just decades? And what do these ancient stones reveal about our own time, our own values, and the way we build today? Chapter 6: Why Medieval Walls Still Stand. The final secret, and what it teaches us today. Stand in front of a medieval wall, any wall, and you're staring at something that has survived more than most countries, governments, and civilizations. It has endured storms that uprooted forests, floods that swallowed farmlands, wars that burned cities, and freezing winters that cracked lesser structures to dust. Yet it remains, almost unbothered. Modern construction often tries to dominate nature. Medieval construction worked with it. They understood a profound truth: a perfect wall is not the strongest wall. A perfect wall is the one that stays alive through movement. This philosophical difference, cooperation over domination, is something modern. Time as a building material. Here's the beautifully ironic part: modern builders use machines to work fast. Medieval builders use time itself as a tool, profit, and deadlines. The weaknesses include non-breathable cement that traps moisture, thin walls with no mass connection to the land, responsibility to the future. And these values seeped into every inch of their walls. Today, we often prioritize, and those values seep into our buildings too. They stand only as long as our priorities allow. Medieval walls whisper to us across centuries. They've learned to live with time, not collapse under it. 1,000 years of storms tried to break them. They bent. They flexed. They healed. And they stood back up. That's not architecture. That's resilience made physical. A final thought: the invitation of endurance. So why are these medieval walls still standing after 900 years? Because they were built with deep foundations, living mortar. Imagine what would still be standing 1,000 years from today.